There are mornings when the light enters the room, but it feels a little softer than it once did. You sit on the edge of the bed, feeling the quiet weight of another day beginning, and you wonder why your energy doesn't rise with the sun the way it used to. You stretch your hands, noticing the stiffness in the fingers, and as you walk toward the kitchen, there is a small sigh that escapes without you noticing. It's not a sigh of defeat. It's a sigh of a body that has carried many years, many stories, and many silent battles. That quiet fatigue, that fog that arrives before noon, that restlessness in the late afternoon, none of it is your imagination. It is the body speaking in a different tone, and with age those signals soften until they almost disappear. Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, who lived well past a century, once said that aging is not a sudden change, but a shift in how the body communicates. After 60, he explained, the internal messages become quieter. Hunger doesn't announce itself loudly, dehydration hides beneath a mild headache, and certain habits that once caused no harm begin to whisper warnings that are easy to miss. Sugar is one of these quiet intruders, not simply the sugar from cakes or desserts, those we can see. The real confusion comes from the sugars that slip into our day without permission, tucked into items we trust, items we have eaten for years, items that look harmless on the shelf. They settle quietly into the bloodstream, affecting older adults differently, more intensely and more silently. Dr. Andrew Weil, another voice who bridges ancient wisdom with modern understanding, describes chronic sugar exposure as a kind of internal irritation, not a sharp pain, not a sudden illness, but a slow, persistent friction inside the blood vessels, nerves, and metabolic pathways. Like a small stone in the shoe that you don't notice at first, but after a few miles it changes the way you walk. Sugar works in a similar way. Its effects accumulate long before the symptoms appear, long before the fatigue, the afternoon crash, the irritability at sunset, or the difficulty concentrating on a simple task. For many older adults, what looks like ordinary aging is often the delayed echo of sugars consumed hours earlier. That is why, in this conversation, the role of the longevity doctor becomes essential. Not to criticize or frighten, but to clarify what truly happens inside the older body when sugar moves through it. To explain how sugar can accelerate aging pathways, disrupt energy, and deepen metabolic imbalances, especially when muscle mass has decreased, when insulin responses are slower, and when the liver works harder to keep everything stable. The intention here is simple, to help you understand your body in the language it speaks now, not the language it used to speak at 30 or 40. So in this video, we will explore 3 pieces of knowledge that have helped many people protect their autonomy and clarity with gentle, sustainable steps. First, we will decode the hidden sugars that pass unnoticed in daily foods. Then, we will understand how artificial sweeteners, those substitutes that promise safety, affect an older body that depends heavily on balance. And finally, we will explore timing strategies that soften sugar's impact, strategies used in traditional cultures where elders continue to live with vitality well into their 90s. None of this is meant to alarm you. The purpose is protection. Protection of your movement, your memory, your independence, your dignity. Because the truth is this, your body still wants to live. It still wants to walk, to think clearly, to enjoy sweetness without suffering. It simply needs you to listen to the signals that have become softer with time. You are not getting old, you are maturing with wisdom. And part of that wisdom is understanding what helps you rise in the morning with strength and what quietly drains that strength before the day even begins. Let us walk slowly into this subject, not with fear, with awareness, with care, with the quiet courage that comes from knowing that at any age one small change can open a door you thought was already closing. With age, muscles become less efficient at storing glucose, and the body suddenly has fewer places to safely send the sugar that arrives at breakfast or in that mid-morning snack. What used to be quickly absorbed now lingers in circulation a little longer, asking the pancreas for help again and again. The liver, already carrying the burden of decades of meals, medications, and emotions, tries to compensate. It works harder in the background, often without complaint, but the strain accumulates. This is why the same foods that once felt harmless can suddenly leave you feeling heavy, sleepy, or unsteady later in the day. The science behind it is simple, but the lived experience is what matters most. The slower walk, the unexpected yawn, the mind that suddenly feels crowded. Many older adults describe something puzzling, a wave of irritability or deep tiredness that settles in the late afternoon. They assume it is part of the natural process of aging. Yet for a large number of people, this discomfort traces back to hidden sugars consumed early in the day, sugars that enter the bloodstream quickly but reveal their effects hours later when the body is no longer expecting them. A flavored yogurt, a packet of oatmeal, a slice of bread with added sweeteners, all of them can create delayed glucose spikes that feel nothing like sweetness. They feel like fog, like heaviness, like a mood that drops without explanation. It is not weakness. It is the body trying to navigate a landscape that has changed with time. One quiet way to support this aging physiology is by becoming aware of the many names that sugar hides behind. Maltodextrin, corn syrup solids, rice syrup. These ingredients do not look like the white crystals we associate with sweetness. They do not taste overwhelmingly sugary at first, but inside the bloodstream, they raise glucose quickly, often more rapidly than sugar itself. For someone over 60, with a body already working harder to maintain order, these hidden forms of sweetness can be especially challenging. They slip into soups, crackers, cereals, and beverages, settling into daily routines without drawing attention to themselves. Unmanaged sugar in the older body is not explosive. It is not dramatic. It is like a slow leak in a tire, gentle, almost invisible, but capable of changing the balance of everything. At first, you may simply feel that walking becomes slightly more tiring. Then the energy that once carried you through the afternoon begins to fade sooner. The nights feel longer, the mornings feel heavier. It happens little by little, day by day, until one afternoon you notice that the world around you feels slightly more distant, and you are not sure when that sensation began. I once heard a story of a man in his 70s who lived alone after his wife passed. Every afternoon he felt a sudden weakness that made him sit down before finishing his walk. For years he believed it was age catching up with him. Only later did he realize that the flavored instant breakfast drink he started each day with contained more sugar than the desserts he refused to eat out of caution. When he changed nothing else except that morning choice, the afternoon heaviness softened. His body had been asking for help. He simply did not hear it over the familiar routine of everyday life. If this message about sugar and healthy aging speaks to you, consider subscribing. More gentle, practical guidance awaits to help you protect your clarity, strength, and independence. What science observes in simple terms is that frequent exposure to small hidden sugars creates a gentle but persistent strain on the body. Not a dramatic illness, not an immediate reaction, but a slow warmth beneath the surface, an inflammation that the liver must soothe again and again. Over the years, this repeated burden contributes to the development of fatty deposits in the liver and a reduced ability to handle glucose with stability. For someone over 60, whose organs already carry a lifetime of resilience and effort, these subtle hits to the system matter. They accumulate quietly like dust on a shelf that no one remembers to wipe anymore. When researchers look at communities where people regularly live into their 90s with strength and clarity, they notice something simple. Older adults in those regions rarely eat packaged foods. Not out of discipline, but because their meals come from whole ingredients prepared at home, from gardens, from markets, from traditions passed down through generations. There, food has a face and a memory. A tomato picked that morning, beans soaked overnight, fruits sliced at the table. The sugar content of these foods is predictable, natural, and balanced with fiber, protein, and movement. These elders do not fear sugar, but they rarely encounter the hidden versions that quietly raise glucose and strain the system day after day. For those who live far from such traditions or who depend on supermarket shelves, there is a gentle habit that can shift the landscape, choosing unsweetened versions of familiar foods and bringing the sweetness back in with one's own hands. Adding a handful of nuts to plain oatmeal, stirring cinnamon into yogurt, mixing fresh fruit into a bowl instead of relying on syrups or flavored packets. These small touches restore control, not through force, but through awareness. They allow the body to taste sweetness in its natural form, surrounded by fibers and nutrients that soften its impact. Hidden sugars resemble fine cracks forming in a bridge over time. At first, the structure looks the same. It stands strong, supporting every step. But beneath the surface, these cracks slowly widen. They change the stability long before the collapse becomes visible. In the same way, small amounts of unnoticed sugar create subtle shifts inside the body. The morning energy fades sooner, the digestion feels heavier. The mood becomes slightly uneven. None of this happens quickly, and none of it announces itself loudly, but the body feels each crack in its own quiet way. I once heard about a woman in her late 60s who believed she had finally found a healthier rhythm. She no longer baked sweets, rarely ordered dessert, and avoided anything that looked indulgent. Yet her blood sugar continued to rise, and her energy dipped at unpredictable moments. What she discovered later was that the granola bar she ate every afternoon contained more sweeteners than the dessert she had stopped enjoying out of fear. The small choice she trusted became the very thing holding her back. It reminded her that health is not always about removing pleasure, but about seeing clearly what stands in front of us. Some of the strongest observations in modern science show that certain artificial sweeteners can affect the balance of gut bacteria, the tiny community living in the digestive tract that helps regulate digestion, blood sugar, appetite, and even mood. This community becomes more delicate as we age. It loses diversity, becomes more sensitive to stress, and recovers more slowly from disturbances. When sweeteners enter this environment, they can shift the balance in ways the older body feels immediately. Bloating that arrives without warning, cravings that grow stronger, hunger that appears even after eating. These reactions are subtle, yet deeply connected to the way the brain and body communicate with each other. One of the most surprising experiences older adults report is an increase in cravings after consuming artificial sweeteners. It may seem contradictory. The taste of sweetness signals pleasure, comfort, and energy. But when the brain receives that signal and no real energy follows, it senses a missing piece. It reaches again for food, asking for the calories it expected but never received. This is not a failure of willpower. It is biology. It is the brain attempting to complete a loop that sweeteners interrupt. And for someone already navigating the natural shifts of age, changes in appetite, hormonal rhythms, sleep patterns, this interruption can feel like an invisible tug pulling them toward more food than they truly need. There are ways to ease this confusion without abrupt changes or deprivation. One gentle approach is to blend familiar habits with new ones. For example, mixing sweetened beverages with unsweetened versions helps reduce reliance on intense sweetness while allowing the taste buds to adapt gradually. For those who miss flavor, water infused with citrus, mint, or even a slice of ginger provides refreshment without provoking the body's deeper metabolic responses. These shifts are not meant to eliminate sweetness, but to restore balance in a system that works differently with age. Artificial sweeteners behave like a trick mirror. They reflect the sweetness the tongue recognizes, but when the body reaches for the substance behind the reflection, there is nothing there. It is this gap between taste and nourishment that leaves the older body uncertain, adjusting itself repeatedly throughout the day in the hope of finding stability. The sweetness appears familiar, but the response it triggers is incomplete. I recall hearing about a woman in her 70s who began drinking several cans of diet soda each day after her doctor warned her about sugar. She believed she was protecting herself, and in many ways she was trying her best. Yet she noticed her cravings intensifying, her appetite growing at unusual times, and her digestion becoming unpredictable. She thought age was catching up with her. Only later did she learn that the sweeteners in her drinks were contributing to the very discomfort she was trying to avoid. Her body was not misbehaving, it was trying to communicate. When sweets are eaten on an empty stomach, they move quickly into the bloodstream. The body, already navigating slower insulin responses and reduced muscle storage, becomes overwhelmed by the sudden surge. This is not dramatic pain or illness, but a gentle imbalance, a feeling of weakness, a wave of warmth, a dip in clarity. The same sweet food, however, behaves differently when eaten after a balanced meal. The proteins, fibers, and fats create a natural cushion, slowing the absorption of sugar and giving the body more time to distribute energy without strain. This simple shift reflects something deeper about aging. The body still understands sweetness, but it needs a softer entry. In many Mediterranean and Japanese homes, sweets have always been part of life, yet rarely as an isolated snack. They appear at the end of meals, offered with tea or conversation, never rushed and never taken alone. This rhythm has existed for generations, not because of scientific studies, but because of practical wisdom observed in daily life. Elders in these cultures enjoy their treats without experiencing the sudden highs and lows that have become so common elsewhere. Their traditions quietly teach that timing. Sweetness is just as important as choosing what to eat. For those living in different circumstances, perhaps alone or on a fixed income, there are gentle habits that can soften the body's response. When a craving appears, pairing sweetness with a source of stability makes a meaningful difference. A small piece of dark chocolate after lunch, for example, settles smoothly when the stomach is already grounded. A piece of fruit eaten with a handful of nuts creates a blend of fiber and protein that slows digestion in a natural, comforting way. These combinations do not remove pleasure, they protect it. They allow sweetness to enter as part of a larger harmony rather than as a sudden burst. Timing sweetness is like adjusting the flame beneath a pot on the stove. If the heat is too high, everything burns quickly. But when the flame is steady and controlled, the meal cooks gently, releasing its flavors without chaos. In the same way, sweetness becomes steadier, calmer, when it enters a body already supported by nourishment. It no longer startles the system. It becomes a quiet pleasure again. The years bring a quieter way of listening to ourselves, and Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara often reminded us that aging is a partnership between the body and the choices we make. Sugar is one of those choices that shapes how we move, think, and recover each day. Its effects are subtle, not only in desserts, but hidden in foods that seem harmless, and in sweeteners that promise safety, yet unsettle an older body's balance. These small influences can blur energy, disturb appetite, and make clarity harder to hold on to. Stay close to this kind of knowledge. It keeps the body steady and the mind clear. Subscribe for more gentle guidance that protects your strength. Dan Buettner's observations of long-living communities show a different rhythm. Their sweetness is not forbidden. It simply arrives with intention. Meals are made from whole foods, eaten slowly, and timed in a way that keeps cravings calm and metabolism steady. A sweet taste appears at the end of the meal, never alone, never rushing into an empty stomach. It is part of life, but not its center.